Well, and this evening we're going to be doing some personal development and looking at the home and school connections for English language learning. First off, just simply in the social world, there is just so many influences that represent culture diversity. You look at clothing trends, and then particularly you can see through social media, of course. Recently, the Super Bowl, having Bad Bunny be in the Super Bowl, brought up a lot of discussion that you can use in your classroom. And then the World Cup, of course. Anytime that there is a positive social event, you can incorporate what's happening in social media that your students might be seeing online anyway into the classroom and using that to respect the differences that might be demonstrated, or the food or the culture. Or the families or the worldview of what the situation is on social media. Because you really want to take a look at respecting the differences that are not necessarily always linked to academic or behavior in the classroom. What are these cultural representations that you're seeing out in the world, in the families, in social media? And then those influences have a positive effect on your classroom, on other students, and even ourselves as teachers. So we want to make sure that we have the competency to understand and also continue to have an open mind and be ourselves a life learner of these different cultural trends and or the family dynamics, particularly with values and beliefs. This could be specifically around religion, but also when it's represented of the students' life experiences of their values, their beliefs. What are they bringing when they're learning language? Words that are cognates or ideas or phrases that might represent an emotion or something that we don't necessarily have in English, but that it is an asset to bringing that idea into the classroom. You also just want to make sure that you have a relationship with the families. And again, this is a talk about the home connection as well with values and beliefs. You want to be very supportive and respectful. And to build that relationship, you can openly ask about culture, their interests and practices, so that you can, any holidays or events that might be occurring, you can support that for your student. And again, when you support the student with the differences or similarities of other cultures, you're supporting the whole classroom with diversity and inclusion. Because the role of culture at its very core is that every student, regardless of language, has a home culture. And it might just be an English speaking culture, but within that, there are different layers of rate and necessity that the home language might emulate. So you really want to make sure that the role of the culture and the experience of the student is being part of your teaching, and that you're responsive to what they're saying, to what's going on in their home life as well as their culture. And with that as well, that again, we tapped into social media to make sure that if anything's going on for them in the world, that maybe you need to have empathy for them. The classroom environment is going to be an inclusive classroom. It's going to meet the need of every learner. Some of this information I'm talking about is on teacherhub.com. You can look that up. But it's not necessarily going to be different than mainstreaming or a general education classroom when you meet the needs of the students where there are. All classrooms should be working on inclusion, and this looks a variety of ways, which we'll talk about in a minute. The strategies in the classroom that we want to use is maybe have activators, games, icebreakers, brainstorms that lets everyone participate, those shyer students or those students who want to share immediately. And then you can also have the things that support their independence, that require mastery of the language by giving frequent feedback. So you could have a poster project or something like that that supports them in the classroom. At home strategies are, of course, those newsletters going home, checking in with parents on a regular basis, or even sending materials like an All About Me poster, or asking relatives if they've had a situation like this. If you're reading a novel about someone who has passed on, you could have discussions with that at home and what their traditions are around death and dying, to be inclusive, to be empathetic. So those are just some ideas of how we are can be a responsive teacher with other cultures in the class. What we're going to look at is the supporting the needs of English language learners. There's lots to talk about here, so we're going to very briefly go over what are some strategies for responsiveness, the strengths and the needs of our students. Mostly you just want to start looking at the various learning types. Are they going to learn through visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or verbal language? And then you want to pair that with your differentiation or moderation of what content you're giving them or the objectives. You're going to want to use interactive lessons to draw students out or possess pro- process related materials for details of the students that love that. You might want to process their emotions if that's what they're up for. Anything that has them starting to think in the English language and then put it down in either reading or writing or some sort of performance. You also have your emulators. Those are for your highly verbal and curious students. You could use science experiments are great for that. There's hands-on, but then there's also the details of needing to do the what are the objectives of the science experiment and what we're trying to discover. It's really important to understand for the English language learner the emotional, cultural needs that are established for the culture of the classroom. The safety of the classroom and the social emotional wellness are super important for any of our students to feel like they can have a voice, they can sometimes mess up, and that it will be okay for them. So you want to explain the classroom expectations to them. You could take them around the room, show spots where they could have a pull out or breakout at the table. And you want to demonstrate the areas that participation is expected, but then on what level that might look like. You want to also establish the relationship with the parents so that the structure of the classroom is explained to them because they might have different guidelines or ways that they have their household structured that either align with or are the same structure as the classroom. So you want to pair those two, make sure that the parents understand what's expected of the student and the student understands what's expected of them, both linguistically but also behaviorally, so that there's not any discord in that so that student can be supported in their language learning. You can also boost motivation specifically by using lessons and objectives that align with their strengths in their language. You can provide topics that are inclusive to them and their preferences whenever possible, because when they're motivated to learn and the assignments are congruent with their passions, they're going to be more motivated. So that's a little bit about supporting the needs of the English language learner, and let's move on to our last. I just want to wrap up the idea of having the culturally responsive teacher and then supporting the student and then also bringing it together with the home and school connection. There are so many different ways that you can incorporate the family, the culture, and the heritage in your classroom, as well as bringing it home to the family. You can align with the family on sports or music or media, as we talked about before, family traditions, celebrations, along with any food or communities or religious events. So anytime that there might be a holiday that aligns with your students' cultural heritage, you, of course, want to try to incorporate the family if they'd like to come in, or participate, or the student themselves would like to. Sometimes they might have a day off because of that particular holiday, and that also can be a way to demonstrate inclusion and be very supportive and respectful for that student as well as the entire classroom. Really, one of the best ways to build strong family community is to find out what their kind of communication, to always be making sure that the email and phone number are updated, and that daily communication for my school that I often work with. If you need that at first to build a rapport, and then weekly, and then in their home language, if you need to use translation, you want to find out, be very respectful, and really share also some of yourself, what goes on for you. Find those similarities, and then celebrate the differences. And then ask for feedback. Effective communication is going to be like, hey, what's working? What's not working? So that they feel part of the conversation as well. It's not always just you as the teacher telling them the way it is. And then you can celebrate together when there's an achievement or a goal because you know what goals they're looking for as well as your own academic goals. So including the community is also about just asking questions and just not assuming that the family can find where the emails are or that they know, especially as more and more online content comes in or assignments are on online media, like that they can access that they know how to navigate that in English or in their home language if they need to. So really you just want open communication, looking at the assets of these children that have a different culture than your own, if they do, or embracing the similarities. So you want to find those and that you have an awareness that there are cultural differences, but with curiosity, and you want to celebrate with this idea of a beginner's mind of acceptance, and that will put you forward a long way with helping the student, the school environment, and the home all come together. Thanks.